Welcome to ZKast, everyone. I'm Zias Caraval from ZK Research, and I'm here for a Wi-Fi 7 version of ZKast. Before we get going, though, I do want to give a quick shout out to eWeek. eWeek's my media partner, and all ZKasts are done in conjunction with the eWeek eSpeaks program. I'm joined today by David Coleman, who is with the Office of the CTO at Extreme Networks. He's also their Director of Wireless. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk Wi-Fi 7, which is interesting because it seems like we just finished talking about Wi-Fi 6E. Before we get going, though, Dave, can you just give us a quick intro to yourself, what you do, what your background is, stuff like that?
Sure. As you already said, I work at Extreme Networks. I work with in the office of the CTO with a bunch of people that are a lot smarter than me. I'm Director of Wireless. I have a long career in Wi-Fi, well over 20 years. I've written multiple books about Wi-Fi, including dummies booklets, as well as the CWNA Cybex study guide, which is in its 6th edition. And is used kind of as a reference guide for people that actually deploy Wi-Fi all over the world. And I came over to Extreme Networks in the Aerohive acquisition, but Wi-Fi has kind of been my niche in my career for well over 20 years now.
So you're a wireless propeller head. So
that's right.
Yeah. Before we talk about Wi-Fi 7 specifically, though, let's just talk about just in general the importance of Wi-Fi, right? Like years ago, I think we used to think of Wi-Fi as that the network of convenience. And if you wanted performance, you did something wired. And if you wanted convenient, you did Wi-Fi. But that's not really the case anymore, is it? That what's driving companies to invest more and more in their Wi-Fi to expand the network?
Well, it's interesting you say that because, everybody is gone way beyond convenience. Wi-Fi is a must-have in pretty much all facets of life, including the enterprise in all verticals. Something I'm fond of saying is Wi-Fi is part of our communications culture. If you think about the brand of Wi-Fi, it's right up there with Band-Aid, or Coca-Cola. That's how people use it as their primary access technology to get on corporate networks, home networks, and the internet. Without a doubt, it's the first place they go to access information, and it's Wi-Fi. So to answer your question, all verticals drive Wi-Fi because people want to have it. They're used to having it as part of their daily communications culture. But if one concept I do like to always talk about is the consumerization of IT. And so you actually mentioned that it used to be, a nice to have, and now it's a must have. Well, if you go back in the early days of Wi-Fi, it was actually consumers and home Wi-Fi that drove it to the enterprise. So if you think about it historically, people got Wi-Fi at home. It wasn't very secure at the time. They took it to work. They said, I want Wi-Fi now. The IT administrator said, no, that's not secure. And guess what they did? They brought it in anyway, right? So they forced the enterprise to deal with it. And now it's a mature technology. I mean, Wi-Fi is like 22 plus years old now. And so, it's very rare that you'll find an enterprise or a vertical or somewhere where there's not Wi-Fi available, and it's not part of the daily culture.
Only in my career when I was in corporate IT, how many rogue access points I took out of places like that. And if Wi-Fi is interesting, though, because you see kids today when they go places, the first thing they do is look for Wi-Fi, right? And, in fact, I was talking with a convention center manager who's actually one of your customers, and he was saying that in competing for the convention business, good quality Wi-Fi is at the top of the list because people set up their booths and they want to do demos and show stuff they're running on Amazon. And of course, if you can't connect over Wi-Fi, your whole demo doesn't work. And so that has become, one of the most important things.
Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, once again, this is not really anything new. I mean, I remember taking my kids to go see college universities. This was 10 years ago. And the first thing they asked when they were going on campus and looking around is they wanted to know, how's the Wi-Fi here? Now, that's 10 years ago, okay? Hospitality is another industry that is a perfect example of this. Hotels, which have traditionally offered horrible Wi-Fi, but that is changing. They're changing to offer Yeah, and they're trying to get to enhance the user experience and not mount the APs in the wall, instead mount them in the rooms. But people, if they go to a hotel and there's not good Wi-Fi, or for a matter of fact, free Wi-Fi, guess what? The next time they stay, they'll stay at the hotel across the street.
Yeah.
So
Wi-Fi 7, as I mentioned, it just seems like we finished talking about 6E. So what is Wi-Fi 7 and how does it differ from 6 and 6E?
okay, so Wi-Fi 7 really isn't a thing yet. So that's what a lot of people don't know. So the brand and the name of Wi-Fi 7 will be owned by the Wi-Fi Alliance, and it will be a certification of a new standard of Wi-Fi. And the certification testing has been announced that the Wi-Fi Alliance has announced their intention to have a certification, but they haven't given us a date yet, but they obviously have announced that they're working on it, and we're involved in that as well. But it's based on the IEEE draft amendment of 802.11be, which is extremely high throughput. And I guess the next one is going to be uber high throughput, but right now they're talking extremely high throughput. And it has, yeah, it's just names. And but the name Wi-Fi 7, it's already out there. But we might get into this in a little bit more detail, but in my mind, the main thing about Wi-Fi 7, it's building on what was introduced with Wi-Fi 6E, and that is the availability of the 6 gigahertz frequency band. And we're going to get a few new bells and whistles that have the potential to enhance our throughput even higher. So speeds and feeds is kind of the focus of this new generation of Wi-Fi, but it doesn't exist without the availability of the 6 gigahertz band that was introduced with 6E.
So for speeds and feeds, give me an idea of if you deployed 6, 6E, and 7, what are the differences in speeds one would expect to get?
Okay, so there's the marketing and then there's the real world. So let me just say that the marketing you're going to hear about Wi-Fi 7, you're going to hear up to 33 gigabits per second Wi-Fi link. Well, that is ridiculous. Okay, that is in theory if you got the stars to align and every single little feature was to work. So one of the things that as an industry that I think we're bad at sometimes is we always talk about the maximum potential data rates and speeds, but that's not real world. Okay, it looks great on a box and for marketing purposes or on a data sheet, but in the reality, 33 gigabits per second for Wi-Fi 7 is not true. Now, I will say this. Intel and Broadcom did a really nice demo last year together where they demonstrated under controlled conditions, but they demonstrated a 5 gigabit per second Wi-Fi link using multi-link operation. And now, once again, that's under controlled conditions. I still think in most cases it's going to be less than that. You also need to understand that at the end of the day, too, that there's always medium contention, right? And because of medium contention alone, where devices competing for access onto this frequency space, that in itself eats up whatever 50% of whatever the advertised data rate is. We will see better speeds, but at the end of the day, I'm more of a believer about moving forward. It should be all about enhancing the wireless user experience. So there's a big trend in the industry as well, but I will say this with Wi-Fi 7, you're going to hear a lot about speeds from about 4 or 5 different features.
Okay. And I will say I did my own testing at one of the sports venues with the Wi-Fi 6 phone and they're already running 6E, and I got about 200 meg download.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
With 6, but I got about a gig on 6E. So,
yeah, I've actually gotten a gig before at home with one AP and one client with Wi-Fi 6E. I've done that and actually surpassed that, but that's one client and one AP. When you start adding more clients into the competing medium, that's when the numbers start to drop.
One AP per client, that's all we need.
Yeah, one AP per client always sounds great, and it sounds great for bake-offs. You can get these sometimes these ridiculously high rates, but always remember it's kind of a competitive environment for access.
Okay, and so when is this coming? And I'll break the question up into 3 different questions, and I don't expect an exact date like December 23rd, with whatever, just sort of general, when are we going to see consumer APs, enterprise class APs, and devices that support Wi-Fi 7?
So my prediction, it was all the chipset vendors have already announced their chipsets and their radios, and the two biggies are broad for APs or Broadcom and QCA, and Broadcom also does, and both of them also do client chipsets, and then there's also Intel as well, and then there's a handful of others, right? They've all announced it. They've all have chipsets that are finding their way into reference boards and are currently being tested and made into products for the future. My prediction is you will see the first Wi-Fi 7 like consumer grade home router sometime between March and May of this year.
Oh, that fast. Okay.
Yeah, you'll probably see a couple. The consumer grade stuff always hits the enterprise. Now, how many Wi-Fi 7 features, which we haven't really gotten into, it'll support maybe the 4K QAM, maybe the 320 megahertz channels. I doubt initially the multi-link operation. I do think we'll see a smartphone, probably in that same kind of time frame. We'll see at least one vendor come out with what they call Wi-Fi 7 smartphone. Keep in mind that none of this will be certified by the Wi-Fi Alliance yet, because there is no certification. So pre-Wi-Fi 7 certification, we'll probably see a Wi-Fi 7 smartphone with basic features, capabilities, more feature-rich smartphones coming out maybe in Q4 of this year. My prediction for enterprise, probably first half of 2024, maybe as early as Q1. Somebody might pop earlier, but probably early 2024. Interestingly enough, there was one vendor that has already announced a Wi-Fi 7. They're not shipping it yet, but they've announced a Wi-Fi 7 AP in China, which I find very hilarious since there's no 6 gigahertz in China yet. And but that being said, is my contention that 6 gigahertz will be a big part of the story with Wi-Fi 7, and it will carry that story further.
All right. So now you mentioned some of the bells and whistles that are coming, right? And you kind of dropped, multi-link and things like that. So what are those unique Wi-Fi 7 bells and whistles?
Well, I think it comes down to about 4 or 5 features, and some are going to be better than others. So one you're going to hear a lot of hype about, because it will give us potentially huge data rates, is 4K QAM modulation. So it's it's a step higher, a couple steps higher than what we have currently, which is 1 or 2 for QAM. But when you get into these more complex modulation methods, that you need a more pristine RF environment. You need higher SNR. So historically, if you look back at a 256 QAM, which came with Wi-Fi 5, you need an SNR of about 25 dB. When we got to 102.4 QAM with Wi-Fi 6, you need an SNR of about 31 or 32 dB. And now you're talking about an SNR for this new complex modulation of about 41, 42 dB. You're not going to get that in 2.4 gigahertz. Having that kind of a clean RF environment, it's going to be hard to achieve it in 5 gigahertz. Sure, you probably accomplish it in 6 gigahertz, but you're going to have to be within, sitting distance of the access point to achieve some of that kind of data rate. So what I'm getting at, that is going to be a consumer grade feature. I do not see that being practically used in the enterprise, but to what you were saying earlier, one client, one AP, one Wi-Fi 7 client, one Wi-Fi 7 AP in a room right next to each other. Sure, it'll probably work. So that's one. The other one that I also view as a consumer grade feature is the 320 megahertz channels. Okay, so sounds great in theory. Yeah, sounds great in theory, but that's another way that you're going to say, oh, that's how you're going to get gigabits and gigabits of speed. Well, the bigger the channel, the more data you can modulate, but it doesn't scale. It doesn't scale in the enterprise. As a matter of fact, in Europe, first of all, the 320 megahertz channel is only going to be available in 6 gigahertz. And in the United States, with the current available frequency, there's 3 possible channels. In Europe, 1. Okay. If you're going to do channel reuse patterns with multiple APs in the enterprise, it's just not doable. You'll have co-channel interference. But once again, consumer grade feature, one AP, one room, one client. And by the way, that consumer grade stuff I mentioned that's probably coming out later this year, I promise you that'll be the default setting too, which will actually cause problems if you have a consumer grade deployment next to an enterprise deployment. Will actually cause what's called OBSS and CCI interference, but it's a consumer grade feature. I think the main feature that you're going to hear for the enterprise, but also for consumer grade, is something called multi-link operations. So think multiple channels in multiple bands. So theoretically, you could do 3 channels in all 3 bands, but let's just say a 5 and a 6. And what if the Wi-Fi 7 client and Wi-Fi 7 AP could transmit on a 5 gigahertz channel and a 6 gigahertz channel, and there's numerous different ways to do it. One could be a link steering, where you're going back and forth between those 2 channels in different bands. One could be an aggregation, and one could be redundant data. Now, my personal belief, when you start talking about clients and APs, it will be the steering capability that will work. Is the one that'll work. Because think of a client or an AP constantly choosing the best available channel, and also the one that's open first, and switching back and forth on theoretically on a frame per frame basis. That will enhance latency, and also you can make an argument that it will rise your throughput a little bit. Now, the one that will get hyped, though, ZS, will be the aggregation, right? Because if you aggregate 2 channels on 2 bands, once again, great throughput. I don't see that right off the bat working very well with clients in APs because of a potential wait time. If one band or channel is busier than the other, that could actually be detrimental to your throughput. But where I do see a potential use case for that is mesh, where you have a vendor has 2 APs, they have basically 2 channels, now a multi-channel link. That could be a channel in 5 gigahertz, a channel in 6 gigahertz, or maybe a channel in 5 low and 5 high. Aggregate that. Now you're talking about some really high throughput in backhaul links. So to me, that is the feature that has the most enterprise value moving forward. And once again, unless they're 6 gigahertz, there is no value. So once again, the importance of 6 gigahertz is directly tied to Wi-Fi 7.
Yeah, well, it's coming, right? Eventually everything will
have
that on it. So then we'll need another one, I guess. Now, I got to ask you this question. I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is going to be. With 5G coming, though, do I need Wi-Fi? Does 5G mean less Wi-Fi? Does Wi-Fi 7 mean less 5G?
Yeah.
What's the
you had to ask me that question. Thanks. So,
well, I get asked all the time.
So I get asked it daily. So look, we could talk an hour about just this, but I'll keep it short. So first of all, the first thing you need to understand, when people get very confused when they talk about 5G, because there's public 5G and then there's private 5G. Yeah. When you're talking about public 5G, it's already here. People are using it with this, right? I think the conversation when you start talking about 5G versus Wi-Fi is more the private 5G versus Wi-Fi. And we view the technologies as complementary, not competitive. In most cases, there might be a very narrow space where in the future the 2 technologies might compete, like in, say, manufacturing. And there's some places where private 5G might win, like a big giant outdoor environment. But at the end of the day, if you're just holding the conversation to private 5G versus Wi-Fi, they're both good technologies. Wi-Fi is not going to be replaced by 5G. And by the way, when you look at all the analyst predictions of the growth of 5G going up like that, you don't see Wi-Fi going like this. Yeah. You see the same curve. You see Wi-Fi doing the same thing. So complementary, not competitive.
Yeah. In fact, most companies I've talked to are planning to do both. although there is a lot of confusion between them. There's just too many G's and numbers and 7s and 5s and 6s now. So
yeah, and now we have a numbering scheme with Wi-Fi too, right? So, and if you think about it from the user perspective, no, they just want quality wireless access, right? So I can tell you, most people, they just want a productive and quality experience when they're connected, whether it's connecting to 5G or connecting to Wi-Fi. They don't care what technology they're using, but 90% of the time, very often, the first technology that they're using is going to be Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So let's assume now that someone watching this is a network engineer. Who should be adopting Wi-Fi 7 and who shouldn't be? Like if I'm using Wi-Fi 4, obviously I go to 7, but what types of verticals or use cases, like what's the sweet spot for this?
So honestly, so to me, the sweet spot is where a company is in the refresh cycle. Okay. And so bottom line is, if they're in a refresh cycle now, I think they're doing themselves a disservice if they're just getting Wi-Fi 6 technology. Okay, because if they were to get, and believe it or not, there's some people that are still making that recommendation just to do Wi-Fi 6 and not 6E. I think that's a bad advice, because then if they're not going to do the next refresh for 5 to 6 years, they have no path to 6 gigahertz. So at the end of the day, if they're due for a refresh now, Wi-Fi 6E is just fine for them, and they will have that 6 gigahertz superhighway of spectrum that's never been available before. If Wi-Fi 7 technology is coming out, when it comes out next year in the enterprise, they might want to take a hard look at that. I think what you're going to see, what most vendors do, and I can tell you what we're doing, is we kind of view Wi-Fi 6, 7 as just, the next little hurdle of Wi-Fi 6E. There's a big jump from Wi-Fi 6 to 6E because of all the new spectrum. Wi-Fi 7 is going to offer a few new bells and whistles. To me, the multi-link operation. Do you need, but I don't see that. You're not going to see vendors have a whole line of 15 Wi-Fi 6E APs and then replace them with 15 Wi-Fi 7 APs. You're going to see vendors replace their Wi-Fi 6 APs with their Wi-Fi 6E and their Wi-Fi 7 in a slow rolling thunder, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right, well, that makes sense. And so, but you wouldn't delay your 6E upgrade now if you needed to wait for 6E.
No, I wouldn't, unless I really wouldn't. I just, you hear that all the time. So I use this analogy all the time. Okay, I bought a pickup truck, Dodge Ram pickup truck in December of 2021. And then in the next month, there was 2022 Dodge Ram pickup trucks. Okay. You know what? My 2021 is just fine. It came with this. I think of it, the analogy being a pickup truck that came with an exclusive 6 gigahertz superhighway, and it did. Okay. Well, the 2022 model, which would be analogous to, let's just say 2024 would be analogous to Wi-Fi 7, also comes with that superhighway, but with some new lane assist technologies and a few new bells and whistles. But at the end of the day, the main use cases that they're projecting that might be better in Wi-Fi 7 are, you're talking about some of the AR and VR stuff will have probably better performance moving forward in a Wi-Fi 7 environment. But let's face it, AR and VR, which I view as a viable technology in the enterprise, is just getting started.
Yeah.
So
if I'm a digital trailblazer, right, that very leading edge company where absolutely every packet throughput matters, I might likely go from 60 to 7, but most from a law firm, consulting firm, things like that.
Yeah, no, and I seriously doubt you're going to see anybody that just deployed Wi-Fi 6E last year upgrade to Wi-Fi 7. I think it will, Wi-Fi 6E and 7 will be replacement for anybody that has either Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6.
Got it. Okay. And last question, David.
Sure.
Obviously, with this much bandwidth, right, there's no such thing as an all wireless network, right? There's some wires there somewhere. How do I know if my wired network needs a refresh to support all the
Good question.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm always fond of saying, there's always copper somewhere. Okay. So you do need to think with both Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7, you need to think about two things on the wired side. One is multi-gig and one is PoE. So let's talk about multi-gig first. So I'm always skeptical when I hear people say you need to upgrade to 10 gig links or 5 gig links. You need to do it now, because the thinking is, oh, now all this wireless bandwidth on 3 frequencies, we're going to surpass the 1 gig links. I've been hearing that for 10 years. And honestly, it only happens in corner cases. Now, that being said, what I've been telling people with Wi-Fi 6E, we're at the point now is, look, every AP is going to have at least a 2.5 or a 5 gig uplink port on it. Just go ahead and start thinking about upgrading your switches now for future proofing. Now, Wi-Fi 7, if with multi-link operation, especially if you start doing mesh links with aggregation, then yeah, a 1 gig uplink is clearly not going to be enough. I think 5 gig will be more than enough to future-proof yourself. I think that you'll see on Wi-Fi 7 high-end APs, you'll see 10 gig uplinks, but I'm not going to tell a customer that they need to upgrade all their switches to 10 gig. I think that's overkill. And don't get me wrong, we saw a lot of switches, here at Extreme Networks too. So we'd love you to upgrade too. But that being said, I'm just being honest here. Sometimes there's a little bit of hype when it comes to the gigabit numbers. And there has been traditionally for a long time, but I'm comfortable saying that, clearly 1 gig's not going to be enough with moving forward with Wi-Fi 7. But when you start talking 10 gig, that's, I'm not going to buy into that. The more important conversation is PoE. Okay, yeah. When you're talking about wired, because now you have 3 radios or more that you have to power. So, and it depends on the form factor. With 2x2x2s, you might be able to power. You can power them get full MIMO functionality with 802.11 AT, which is 25 watts. But the days of standard PoE and 15 watts, they're over. Okay, yeah. And it's going to get even tougher with Wi-Fi 7. With Wi-Fi 7, there's no way you're powering a 4x4 AP with AT power. You're going to and maintain full functionality with all the radio chains. You're going to need BT power of 30 watts and more. Now, there will be downgrade functionality, but then, why do that? I mean, so that opens up a lot of interesting conversations about, like, all right, we're going to need more power. We're going to need to upgrade our power budgets. We got to worry about APs rebooting if they're not getting enough power. And then think about it from a European perspective too, where all the green initiatives that are going on over there, we're going to have to work with customers on figuring out, how can we, consume less power, find a way to turn the APs off or down in downtime. So all these things are going to be part of the conversation. And to me, PoE is the more important thing.
All right. Well, I appreciate the candor and honesty there. I think most vendors would say, just go upgrade everything everywhere, right? So
yeah, my sales guys are really mad at me right now. So
I appreciate the practical feedback. So anyways, David, thanks to the tutorial on Wi-Fi 7. If you're watching, that's everything you need to know about Wi-Fi 7 and what to do with your wired network. On behalf of David Coleman from Extreme Networks, I'm ZKast from ZK Research, and I'll see you next time on another ZKast.